So hello, my name's Jake. I am Director of Design at Angel City Data. We are an award-winning web and FileMaker development shop. We specialize in design, business partnership, and tech support. We've won awards for all three of those. Those are sort of our three tenets of our business. And we are a platinum member of the FBA. And we were awarded Burbank's Small Business of the Year a couple of years ago. So those are just a couple accolades. I'm pretty sure most of you know Dave and who we are, but it's in the slide deck. So today, I'm going to be pulling out a piece from, we had an email blast a couple months ago talking about small integrations, small tool integrations that can really boost the power of systems. We have a lot of customers who are resorting to, because of the pandemic, we don't want to build from the ground up, but we would like to make our existing system a little bit more powerful with some existing tools and some small integrations that can really pack a punch. And part of that email blast was focused on the Twilio platform integration with FileMaker. So that's what I'm going to focus on today. And first, I just kind of want to quickly break down what is really needed. What are the components that you're going to need to be able to successfully integrate Twilio with FileMaker? So what we're going to use to make this happen is, first and foremost, a Twilio account. And if you aren't familiar, Twilio is a communications API. It handles SMS, I believe MMS now, voice, video, and authentication. So if you've ever had to log into a website and it says, well, we're going to text message you a code, that's most likely been built in Twilio. So Twilio, you can get to it right here at twilio.com. Makah, it's your favorite word of the day, TWILIO.com. And, you can read a little bit about it. It's HIPAA compliant. There's a bunch of, it's very secure, really fast, and relatively lightweight from a programming overhead. They have some good documentation. So I'm already logged in to our Twilio account here, and we'll go into that in just a minute. But next, what you're going to need is a machine that can run Node.js. That is the platform that we are using to sort of act as a middleman between Twilio and a webhook. It's where we're setting up a webhook for Twilio to call out to FileMaker. And if you're not familiar with Node, it's an asynchronous event-driven JavaScript runtime, which is a fancy way of saying it's JavaScript running on the server, pretty much. The third tool that I'm going to use today is something called Ngrok. This is simply used in this demo because I'm not on a server. I'm on a local machine. And Ngrok is this really neat tool that provides you with an instant secure URL portal to your local host on a specific port. So you can build web applications from your local machine and test webhooks right from your local machine without having to set up a server and set up a public IP and port forwarding and DNS and all that stuff. It kind of cuts all that out and lets you really, really get down to business. So I'll kind of demo that in a second. And the last thing is this obscure tool that I'm not sure if anybody here is aware of called FileMaker Pro. It is a product from a company called Clarice or Claris. I'm not totally sure, but all you'll need in FileMaker is a hosted file on a FileMaker server. That server needs to have a public IP address for this all to work. So I have a Twilio account, which I'll start going through with you. I'm not going to go deep into it because there's a lot of stuff, but essentially the important pieces when you sign up for Twilio is you get an SID, an account SID number. You get an auth token, which is private, and then you can buy as many phone numbers as you'd like. And for this Angel City demo, we have two. So we have I think that's Alabama, pretty sure. Yes. We have an Alabama number and a Burbank number, and those will come into play in just a minute. But I just kind of wanted to show you these numbers. When I dive into them, they have a whole section about messaging. And so what this is when a message comes in, what do I want Twilio to do with it? So when someone text messages this phone number, what do I want to do? And this is essentially saying, well, I'd like to call a webhook through an HTTP post request. And this is where that post request, this whole URL is going to go. Well, in my situation, you'll notice this is probably looking kind of familiar. This Ngrok thing, that is running on my local machine right here. Okay, so this Ngrok is a tool that you can download for free at, I believe it's just Ngrok. Yeah, ngrok.com. And here it is. It's a quick download. It's very easy to use. What I've done here is set up an Ngrok server. It's port forwarding to my 3030 port, providing me with this URL right here. So 77FF3C. If I go back over to Twilio, 77FF3C. So all this is really doing is substituting as a server for right now. And then you'll see here that I'm going to /threads. Okay, that's this particular number. This is the Alabama number. And the /threads is going to be important in just a second. The other number, just to quickly show you, and then I'll tie this together in Node, is going to /logic. Okay, so same exact URL, but with a different slash. So we're posting to a different place. And those are handled, those two hooks are handled in this Node file right here. Okay, so you can see here, it's only 111 lines long. It's not that much code. But you can see here that I'm saying when the app gets a post to /threads, go ahead and go do something with it. And we'll go into what that is in a little bit. When I get a post to /logic, then go ahead and do these things. Okay, so those are directly, I just wanted to outline, those are directly corresponding to those two phone numbers. And so I'll kind of dive in to the three parts of this demo. Let me jump into FileMaker. So the first part of this demo is kind of broken down into three major sections, and they're useful. The use cases for these three different sections are nicely sort of compartmentalized. So this first example is sort of where you would start, and it requires no, I should say this part of the demo requires no node at all. It does require a Twilio account, an SID number, and a number that you've purchased, okay, and an auth token. So this is simply an outbound message. It's really cool for like simple alerts, customer updates, things like that, stuff that you want to send out of FileMaker without having to do that old trick where we would figure out what Verizon's how to email a text message to a Verizon phone number. Without doing that, we can use Twilio really quickly to just send an outbound text message. This does not support incoming messages. It's simply for updates. So what I'll do in this situation is just, that's my wife's number. So she's going to get a text upstairs. She's keeping the kids at bay. So I can also text, anybody here if you'd like, but we're going to get into sort of a little bit more threads. I just wanted to show how quick that is. This is actually right here. This is all you need to do in FileMaker, really. Everything else is sort of just formatting. And all we're doing is setting a URL and then creating a curl post request right here. And then we're inserting. That's it. So sending out of FileMaker is extremely easy. It probably would take you, I don't know, including the Twilio account setup, maybe 20 minutes to get set up. So that's really neat for, like I said, updates, alerts, things that you're not looking for information coming back from anybody. Just sort of, and by the way, no real historical record of it unless you are storing that message in some kind of table or something like that. The second part of this demo is focused around threads. Okay, so actually it looks like Dave texts me back. So I sent Dave a text earlier while I was testing this, and I kind of have this screen that looks like a messaging app. So I have things organized by thread, and when the Node app receives a post to that /threads, it's going to come here. The message ends up here. So this is an area where I'm organizing everything by phone number. So, for example, this is Dave's phone right here. Oh, stop bothering me. Sorry. I'm in a meeting. I can't talk right now. So I'll send that to him. And it's just a simple way to sort of store messages back and forth. This could apply to customers. It could apply to projects. So, if you set up a project phone number for a customer, you could store all of that customer's communication. We're using it right now with a client who they work on these off-road UTVs, and they tune the shocks and the suspension of these really cool vehicles. And a lot of times the client will schedule an appointment to have their car worked on. And from the time they scheduled the appointment until the time where their car is being worked on, there is conversation going on, so that they'll think, well, I'm only going to buy these products. Well, then the day comes when they're actually installing things on the vehicle, and the technician says, I'm reading through your notes here. I would really recommend an additional sway bar, which is another product. It costs money. So rather than call the client, we get permission from them for text message updates. And we organize text messages about that project for that client in a thread. And we can actually text them right from the iPad using that outbound logic here, those 3 lines of code. We can text them and go, hey, is it okay if, here's what I recommend. Here's why I think you should do it. Is it okay? Client can confirm right from there. And we have a historical record of it. So that's really cutting down on some of the miscommunication that was happening between employees and customers, et cetera. So it's a historical record that you can FileMaker, and you can organize it however you'd like. I just built it like a text messaging app here. So I'll kind of run through what the actual code. I just want you guys to see how really simple this is. The actual code that runs to deliver those text messages. And actually, right here. Can you guys all see this? Is this big enough for everybody? I have pretty big monitors. This okay?
That looks fine.
Thumbs up. Looks okay? Okay, cool. So I'm going to break this file down a little bit so that we can kind of break past the nerd wall. So at the top of my file here, I'm requiring a couple of libraries. The first is called Express. Express is it's a package that lets us set those webhooks up. It's routing. So it allows us to say, my app has these routes, and then I can run some logic anytime I get a webhook or a post request or a get request to one of those routes. That's what Express is. It's a 1-line install through npm. It's really simple, and it's very easy to use. So at that point, I'm saying, well, I'm going to have this constant variable called app, and that's just Express being installed. That's all it is. So that's why when you see down here, app.post. So when the app tries to make a post to /threads, I get a request object and a response object, and then I can do some things with those objects down here that we'll go through in a sec. The next is body parser. It helps us read HTML. It's not that big of a deal. Axios is the networking tool that we are using to call out to FileMaker's data API. It's my preferred tool when I'm working in Node. There are others. There's some argument back and forth of whether just to use fetch versus Axios. I prefer Axios, but you can see here. Let me see where we're doing it right here. So right here, I'm configuring a request. All right. So I'm in a function called run FileMaker script, and I accept some params. And at this point, I'm setting up a variable called config, and I'm saying, what method is this request? Well, it's a get request. If any of you are familiar with FileMaker's data API, you know that when I want to run a script, I run a get request to a specific URL. Okay, so the URL in this particular request is here. And the reason it looks like not a URL is because I'm storing it over here. This is my script URL right here. Okay, so it's our dev server /FMI/data vlatest databases, and then you give it the name of the file. And then we're diving into the layouts, and then I want to go ahead and start with this layout. And important to note that this is not really context specific. The URL just requires a layout. So it's not like when you get to the layout, you can only work with records from that table or related data. You can do really anything you want. It's just required to kind of get you into the file. Then you can run a script with the information that you send to FileMaker. So at that point, I'm setting up a couple of headers for my GET request. I have to tell FileMaker that the content type that I'm looking for is JSON that I'll be delivering. And then my authorization is bearer. And then I have a token stored back over here. Oh, no, I'm sorry. The token is set in this function right here. This function runs every 15 minutes. The FileMaker's data API, I'm sure you guys know, requires a token refresh every 15 minutes. So that's all this is doing. It's just re-authenticating. So I'm just storing that token and I'm popping it in right there. At that point, Axios, which is the networking tool I talked about, I go ahead and call it and I feed it that config variable that has my request in it. Then I'm saying after that happens, then I want you to run a function and that function takes in a response. And then I'm going to log the data of that response. And all that's doing is after it calls FileMaker, it's going, okay, did that work? is that good? What's the response from FileMaker? And that's how you'll be able to tell if you're getting a FileMaker scripting error or if there's no error. If the messaging response says no error, you're good. And then we can catch for an error. Okay, so that's sort of the basic. This is just running a FileMaker script. That's what this function does. I'm using Express to go, okay, when I get a text message through Twilio to this particular URL, go ahead and extract all the request data. And then you'll see here on line 70 that I am running that script. So I'm saying, go ahead and run that FileMaker script and I'm feeding it the params. And the params are the message. Okay, so the text of the message that I'm getting from Twilio, I'm getting the from, which is the number, and then the action. And you can really say whatever you want. I could add as many parameters as I wanted here because I can unpack them in FileMaker. And that's where this gets really cool. We'll get there in a second. But so action is thread response. And I can use that in FileMaker as a piece of logic to go, hey, if the action parameter is thread response, do this, right? So what I'm trying to do is, this is only 111 lines long. What I'm really trying to do here is keep you in FileMaker as much as you can. So this is all about how do I get information from Twilio and quickly deliver it to FileMaker where I can do a whole bunch of logic, because we're all really familiar with that workspace. So that's kind of how I've configured this file. The rest of this stuff is really just security things. The port, that's again where Ngrok is going to, localhost port 3030. All right, so that's what that is. And that's really all I'm doing in this particular node file. You can see my post to /logic. Oh, yeah, well, I'm sure. So I'm doing a post to /logic that is saying, go ahead and basically do the same thing you did in threads. I have to extract the from number and the text, but there's some additional things going on here that we'll run through in a minute. I need to actually check the response in this particular section before I want to deliver it to FileMaker. So I have to see if it's valid before I'm going to deliver it to FileMaker. And what that is over here. This part of the demo is focused on, I think, a really cool real world, experience, which is, I have a job or I might have some problem or an issue or a bug or anything, really, a work request that I need to get information out to a number of technicians or employees or programmers or whoever. And I need to deliver some information to them and get a response. And I need to make sure that I triage that response. So I'm looking, this is a situation where it would be reply yes, to move forward, or reply no, if you can't make it. So in this particular situation, I've created a work request, and it's for Angel City Data, this company in Burbank, and it looks like one of their servers are down. Okay, so I can add some technicians here, and I've got a few people's phone numbers. I think I've got David and Dina and Jake and Joe and Jonathan, and I think we'll do Talia. I think I saw on there. So yeah, I'm going to send this to those people. And this is all in FileMaker right now. Nothing's touching Node yet. You can see here, I've added all those technicians to my list to be messaged. Okay, but I can tell I haven't messaged them because none of these little bubbles are filled out. So when I click send work request, FileMaker is going to go through and do a whole bunch of that outbound stuff that I showed you at the very beginning, those 3 lines of code. You can see here when it's done doing what it needs to do, I get those little green checkboxes. And so I know that those people have received those messages, and I can actually go right over here, and this right here is the chat box with the message in it. Okay, so I've broken it down. I'm saying, hey, it looks like we need 7 technicians ASAP. Reply yes if you're able to work on it. So I'm going to just go ahead and say yes. Okay. And Twilio through Node, see, there you go. I get an automatic response. Great. Thanks for your help. We'll let the client know you're on your way. Where's that coming from? Let me show you. I forget where I'm doing it. Well, let me show you in FileMaker first. Oh, look, FileMaker has already grabbed the response. So it looks like Jake, Jonathan, and Talia are available. Dave, Dina, and Joe are not. So this is a really interesting real world example of, for example, we have a customer who books models to be waiters and waitresses at various events. Nike's hosting a corporate event, and we need 14 bartenders, we need 3 hosts, whatever it is. Because they don't play favorites, they load a whole bunch of people onto a list and they say, hey, here's the event information, and if you can make it, here's the date and time. If you can make it, go ahead and respond yes. And then FileMaker's handling a bunch of stuff as they're getting responses. We have we only need 14 of that particular type of person, and you're the 15th. We'll go ahead and contact you next time. That kind of stuff. So we're actually triaging things as they come in. And this is where it starts getting really exciting, because I'm sure, there are clients that you guys can think of where this would be really appropriate to do something like this. Jobs, work requests. For us, it'd be great to be able to, shoot out. We're all remote, right? All teams are all remote at this point. To be able to shoot out an SMS text and go, hey, this client needs support right now, and to be able to get real-time feedback from your technicians or your developers or your employees or whatever, that's really valuable in this, in this weird world that we live in now. Sometimes it helps to be able to, this is another thing we've been focused on, getting data from people who we don't want logged into a system to those people. So we still need people who may not have logins to be able to interact with various touch points in our systems. This is a really cool way to be able to do that. So those are really the 3 examples that I kind of wanted to take you guys through. I wanted to show you how simple this actually is to get started. I mean, I learned all of this in just a couple of days. You guys are smart enough, I'm sure, to be able to figure that. If I can do it, trust me, you'll be fine. Yeah, that's what this is. That's essentially the demo. So I can open it up for questions. I can show you a little bit about, let me see. Yeah, how the outgoing works. So this is just sort of from a higher level. Outgoing is right from FileMaker, and it's through a curl request to Twilio. And then on the other end, somebody gets a text message. That's as simple as it is. I showed you guys the 3 lines here. So really, I'll break this down a little bit more. I'm saying this is given from Twilio. Okay, so they have a URL structure that they prefer. Well, they don't prefer it. It's the only way it works. So you have to deliver the information in this structure. So https://. Then I'm feeding in a variable with the Twilio account ID that I showed you guys at the very beginning. Then I'm giving it a colon, and I'm giving it the auth token. And then they have this string that apparently you have to use every time. It looks like this string was developed in 2010. They've left it alone. And then /accounts, and then / the account ID again. Okay, so that's really, and then /messages.json. That is the URL. Then I'm setting another variable that's a curl variable. And I'm telling curl that I'm posting to this URL. And then I've got some parameters. So in the body, I want to go ahead and put the message. And then I want to say from, and this is our Twilio phone number. This is this is one of these guys. So this is, I think it's coming from Alabama, I think is that one. So this is the Twilio phone number that's using. And recipient phone is whatever I typed into that outgoing message. Okay, so that's the curl request. And at that point, I'm inserting from URL. I'm inserting into a variable called result so that I can do some error capturing. You don't have to do that, but I like error capturing. And I'm just giving it the curl. That's those three. I mean, the rest of this stuff is really just, you guys will, it's going to be familiar with you. I want to make sure that someone's put in a phone number. I want to make sure they put in the message. This is all FileMaker. This right here is really all you need to send a text message from FileMaker, and it's lightning quick. So I just wanted to break down that barrier because I think it's a tool that all of us can, to use, especially in this COVID world where, our teams are really not as close and connected as they used to be. We can implement tools like this to make everyone feel, as connected as possible. So that's what I've got. And I can open it up for questions at this point.
You've got some questions in the chat, and thank you. That was awesome.
Oh, do I? I'm sorry. I haven't been looking. Okay. Where is the chat? Here. I use Zoom every day, and I forget where the chat window is every day. I'm always missing it. So let me go ahead and run through these. Okay. So let me see. Where does the JS portion live? Okay. Good question. So the question is, where does the JS portion live, the JavaScript portion live within FileMaker? And the answer is it doesn't. It doesn't live in FileMaker whatsoever. So this is not actually using the new JavaScript native tools at all. The JavaScript here lives in this file. This is it. Everything else is within FileMaker. And that's what's kind of nice about it, is that we are able to stay in a realm that we're relatively comfortable in, which is script workspace. And we are receiving, when we receive a text message, what we're doing is it comes in the form of a JSON variable. So let me show you. So I'm setting the variable here at the very beginning. This is when I receive a message from Twilio. So get script parameter is going to be, it's going to look something like, where's my terminal? Right here. Yeah. Okay. These are actually all the raw responses. So you can see here, I got a response that looks like it was a yes from this number, and it was a work request response. Okay. So what we're doing in FileMaker is we're sending that JSON variable into this params variable, and then we're extracting, the from number is I'm looking at the parameter variable and I'm extracting the from node. This is a JSON get element. And you'll remember, I think I've got it right here. Yeah. That I'm building this object. This is the param. So from, right? So that param and accessing the from node, that's what this is. Okay. So that's part of the, that's how it's going to grab that element, is that element's named from in the JSON object. So from and my message, and then my action, so that I can do some logic if I'd like. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm saying if the action is equal to thread response, which is what happens in app.post to threads, I'm setting the action to thread response here. When I'm doing that, I'm going to go ahead and check for an existing thread. So this is all native FileMaker stuff, right? And that's what I like about it, is that it's really contained in a place where we all feel really comfortable. And as long as you're okay with setting up a node file, which is very easy to set up, it takes an hour or so, then you can be off and running here. So then I'm saying else if this action is work request response, go ahead and do this deal, which is respond to request. And this is where I'm sure Dave and Dina and Talia and Joe and Jonathan, I think I got everybody, but this is where we're saying if the person responds with yes, then go ahead and send them this, right? So great, thanks for your help. If not, then go ahead and say, okay, we'll keep looking. So again, this is not using any JavaScript. This is then what it does is it goes and it does that outbound text message routine that I showed you, these 3 lines right there. That's all it's doing. So I guess that's the very long way of saying the JavaScript doesn't live in FileMaker at all. What's next? Looks like when you were running this in production, are you running Node.js? Oh, this is a really good question, Steve. So my experience is that running the Node server on a FileMaker server can cause issues, and it's a porting issue, I think. We have a client where we tried to do it all at once, and it just wouldn't work. And I believe it's because there was a conflict. Twilio was, or Node, trying to use the same FileMaker was, and I think we were having a conflict. So we spun up a second virtual machine, and the virtual machine is solely responsible for this. It's a really, really tiny instance, and that's where the node server runs. And it just calls out to the FileMaker server. So I'm sure that there are ways to make it work, but in my experience, I have not been able to. Let's see. Oh, great looking UI. Thank you. I appreciate that. And then it says, is it possible to set it up? RevBiz asks, is it possible to set it up so that several technicians can SMS each other like a conversation? Yes, it is. So Twilio, let me show you. I believe it's gonna be under Docs and Tools. There are, wow, they changed their website a lot. Okay, there are conversations, the idea of a group, kind of a thread within Twilio. So there, if you go through Twilio's SMS documentation, it really gives you everything. And I do want to point out that if some of you are, stronger in PHP than you are in Node, they have a whole framework for that as well. They've got Ruby, Python, Node, Java, .NET, and PHP. So if you're not interested in learning Node, I would recommend it because it's awesome. But if you're not interested, go ahead and, if you've got PHP chops, you can do it there as well. Everything's laid out really, really nicely. So this is a quick start. You're going to, well, this is PHP, so this doesn't look at all like what I just showed you. But if I go to my Node quick start, you're going to see things that look kind of similar to what I was showing you. So we need an auth token, we need an account ID. So this kind of breaks down things in nice steps where you can sort of, what I like about their documentation is that it gets you started on like a baby level, and then it sort of steps it up. And there's whole tutorials about how to build this stuff. So receive and reply to inbound SMS text messages with Express. That sounds a lot like what we were doing. This is the tutorial that I went through to make this happen. So I just want to kind of break down that wall, because I feel like a lot of times, a lot of developers that I work with, at least, they go, well, I don't know, it's in JavaScript and I'm not a really strong JavaScript developer. You don't really have to be. I do program in JavaScript a lot, but that you don't really need to be an expert to be able to get this done. Makah asks, what is your experience with texting images and storing them in containers? It's a really good question. And what you would need to make sure you do is buy a phone number that is MMS capable. So it's really similar. You can buy, the phone numbers have different costs in Twilio, and I think it's like fractions of a penny per message. And the MMS capable phone numbers are a tiny bit more expensive than the ones that are restricted to just SMS. Also, they have fax capable numbers. So if you'd like to fax people from FileMaker, you can do that as well. Yeah, essentially what you would do there is you're going to get an encoded version of that image, and you're going to send the encoded version just like I'm doing here, where I'm parsing things into the JSON object. That's where I'm going to send that encoded image. And then in FileMaker, you handle it by placing it into a container. This particular demo doesn't have that. I think I'd like to work it in, but I didn't have time. So, but good question. You can totally do it. You just need to make sure that your phone numbers are MMS capable. That's all. Let's see, Heidi Porter. The proliferation of the text versus phone is also very useful for get it in writing. Yeah, so that's why this particular client wanted to do this. Was they're called Shock Therapy. If you guys attended Engage, we were surprised, but they had this really neat video that they did, and we had no idea that they were going to be showing it. They work in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per week, some weeks, and so a lot of things were getting missed. A lot of customer requests were getting dropped. A lot of customers were saying, well, I didn't ask for that. And an administrative staff person would say, yeah, you did. And then there's no record because it was all on the phone. So the interesting thing that you're bringing up, Heidi, is that you can get it in writing, but you don't have to waste your time going into email. It's all on a platform that people are really familiar with. We're all using this, thing every single day, and it's lightning quick. I mean, I think you guys saw as messages were coming in, it's under a second. So, getting that kind of sign off and running most of your logic in FileMaker makes it so that you can use all the great things that we love FileMaker for, the ease of use, script workspace, all the stuff we're already really used to. As long as we understand what we're getting back from Twilio through Node, you can make as many business logic decisions as you need to. Jonathan asks, what are the other options besides Webhook when a message comes in? Good question. You guys are smart. So if a message comes in, you get these are all Twilio specific things. To be really honest with you, I haven't dove into these, but you can write internal Twilio functions and you can write what's called a studio flow. And that's all part of their documentation. It's really, this thing is so big. Twilio is so large. You can build call trees. You can build whole call centers with Twilio. This is like a micro example of how easy it is to use. If you want to do something like a studio flow, I would probably direct you over to their docs, because I haven't had the need to do that, because I've been able to get mostly everything that I need to get done using this method. Jonathan follows up with, if the FileMaker server is on Prem and behind a firewall, how does that impact the location of the node file? So this is the exact situation that we had with this particular client, and they are behind a firewall. And so what we did was, we worked closely with IT, and we had them, it's essentially, we had a DNS address set up, and we had port forwarding through the firewall. It was a very tight integration with their IT department to make sure that that he was comfortable with the security of what was coming through. I should also mention that this is all running through HTTPS. So it's the standards of security are pretty high. But Jonathan, I can, if you'd like, we can sidebar and we can talk a little bit more about like the specifics of the client IT, like what kind of approvals we had to get and all that good stuff. I think in the breakout session. Stephen Dolensky is asking, how does this contrast with a solution like FMSMS.com that includes a Twilio gateway, among others?
You're doing that natively, Jake. The FMSMS is sort of, they've demystified it and built a little template for you to connect into. Jake is really kind of doing that ad hoc, and also has access to the full tilt of everything that's available in Twilio at this point.
Right. It unrestricts me from any other FileMaker developer's idea of how I should handle these messages and things like that. So I'm sure this is a great product, and I'm certainly not disparaging it at all. I just think that the more power I get over, if I know how to build it, I'm going to build it, as long as it's not tremendously expensive from a resources or a time perspective, just because I can control, I know exactly what all the pieces are doing, and how I can how I can affect change within those pieces. When things go into a black box like this, sometimes it makes perfect sense, like QuickBooks integration, things like that. Sometimes it makes total sense, but this black box feels a little constrictive for me because it didn't take me that long to build an alternative. That's all.
I think if you're maybe a low end or an intermediate level developer and you're not quite as comfortable, this might be a shortcut on how to add simple texting to your solution. But if you're not afraid of getting your hands a little dirty, you can have a lot more flexibility.
Exactly. Yep. If you're willing to take, honestly, a day to 2 days to learn how it works, then you can. I even have I have a whole, basically the basic integration piece I have up on our Angel City Data Bitbucket. So if any of our developers want to use this in any of their client systems, they just pull the code from that Bitbucket repository onto the client server, and they can be up and running in 5 minutes. And it's not free, because Twilio is, the client's gonna have to pay Twilio, but very, very minimally. But essentially it's free, because the code's already been written. It's very repurposable, and it's easy to configure. Is there surcharges? This is another question from Steven. Is there surcharges when calling different carriers like Verizon, T-Mobile, or AT&T? Yes, I should specify that all standard text messaging rates will apply. So, if the client, if whoever they're sending, there's no additional fee, but if someone who's receiving these messages doesn't pay for unlimited texts, then it will count against their limit. So it's really just, it's the exact same thing as picking up your phone and text messaging someone. It's just running through FileMaker and Node instead. So everything from a network perspective is still the same. I think, well, that's all I'm seeing here. I can show, there's another piece. This has all been really Twilio specific. And if anyone has any more questions about it, I'm happy to answer. But there's another piece that we were talking about in that email that I was telling you guys about, the blast that when we were talking about, our customers really aren't interested in full-blown module build out, up from, ground up, brand new systems. They're really looking for pieces to snap in to their existing systems. And there's another, this is one of them. Twilio is one of them. The other is actually the same customer. They've been a great customer for us over the last year, and we've gotten to kind of play around with some different things. And this particular piece is what we call a job log. And it has nothing to do with Twilio at all, but I've got a little bit of time left. So I figured that I could run through what that looks like, because it's been tremendously helpful, especially as teams are working more remotely. So again, the challenges that our clients are facing right now are everyone's remote, and I don't really want to build, huge pieces of a system right now. We can't afford it. We're trying to be as slim as we can. And I need to make sure that my team is held accountable so that I can communicate back to my customers, because a lot of my team is scattered all over the place. So let me jump into another file here. Sure, save, that's fine. And I'll get out of this guy. Okay. Oh, I gotta wait. Marketing. Okay. Let me jump into FileMaker, and I'll show you. I'll just dive into, this is a live system, but we have some test accounts in here. Test projects and things like that. So the job log that this component, this is super easy to build. It takes, under a day to really get it worked out, as long as you have all the pieces that your clients are looking to track. So what I'm talking about is picking milestones from a project or job's life cycle. So, okay, good. It didn't quit. So picking milestones from a job's life cycle and going, this is something I need to keep track of, that this happened at a particular time. Our customer was frustrated because you have, FileMaker gives us timestamp creation and modification timestamps right out of the box, and that's great. But when you have a whole bunch of administrative staff working on the jobs, and when you have technicians who are taking over for part of the job, or maybe somebody in accounting needs to bill for part of the job, the modification timestamp doesn't really give you the whole story of what you're looking for. So what we built, and let me just find a good job to work with. What we built was this job log module right here. And it's really just one table. And what we're doing is we are saying, okay, I need to pick out the different times that I want to record, for posterity's sake. So for historical sake, I want to make sure that I record who did what on what day at what time, and who it's getting passed to. So it's kind of this, this responsibility chain. And so for this particular customer, customer calls in and says, hey, I'd like to get my vehicle worked on. Well, the job is, they go through a job wizard, a job creation wizard. And at the end of that wizard, a job log record is created. And it's really just, I scheduled the job. So what needs to happen now? Well, I need to get a deposit. And what it does is that job log record creation fires off the creation of a record in another table, which is an action table. And it's just something that we use in our Nimbus product. I'm sure a lot of it's kind of like a to-do. That action is assigned to a few different people. Let me find one that, yeah, here we go. I want to find one that says deposit. Yeah, here we go. Okay, this is a good example. So I scheduled the job on March 2nd at 1:20, and that created a deposit record, okay, a deposit action record. Somebody who is in the accounting department went in here and set that record to done. Well, what that means is that they called the customer, they ran a credit card, they got a deposit. That job is now ready for scheduling. So what it did when she flipped that to done is it went ahead and said, I received a deposit. Here's a receipt number, an authorization number. Who did that on what day at what time? And who's the next department that's going to be basically responsible for this job? And at that time, it's administrative until the job gets started. And there's a whole workflow on the iPad. Their technicians are in their warehouse and they're going, okay, what do I have to do today? It looks like I'm doing a job for Jim Hammis, and I start the job. They get a little notification that says, you're going to take responsibility for this job. Are you okay with that? Well, sure. Once they do that, we create a job started record. And I can see here it was started via iPad by Steve on the 23rd of March at 9:38 a.m. At that point, Steve does what he needs to do on the iPad workflow. And when he's completed, he says, I've completed it. He clicks a button. And we create another job log record that says, hey, go ahead and invoice the remaining balance. Now, there's no final, this is their system launched last March. So I think that's why there's no final invoice job log record on here. But what would happen, this is before that piece was built, but what would happen is the same kind of concept as the deposit, the job would get handed over to, hey, buddy. I have a 3-year-old who wants food. I'll give you food in just a minute, bud. Okay. Okay, I love you. So what would happen is somebody in accounting would be assigned a deposit, or I'm sorry, an invoice action, because the last action needed in the job log record was invoice the remaining balance. Okay, so another record would be created, in which case, let me actually see if I can show you one. I'm sure that I can. Yeah, here we go. So we have, please invoice the remaining balance up here in an action record. Okay, that's because somebody completed the work and which created that action, and then at some point, and it looks like they did 2 here, I'm not sure why, but at some point Emilio called and invoiced for the full balance. At that point, the job is completed, it's done. And what's interesting is there's a whole bunch of other stuff. I mean, there's tons of things in the system where spring kits are getting installed and there's internal valving work that's happening. And we're making sure that we're checking some of the hardware we're installing. That stuff is important, but it's not important in terms of Justin, the owner of this company. He's actually a racer. He races in the dunes down in Mexico and all over the world. And so a lot of times he would be out in the field, and there's a bunch of customers out there because these events, a lot of these events generate customer activity for shock therapy, which is the name of the company. And a customer would come up to him and say, hey, you guys never, ran the deposit, or where's my job at? And he wouldn't know. And so now what he has on his phone, he has access to a mobile version, a really nice mobile version of this job log. So he can pull up that job at any time and say, actually, we checked in your shocks on January 6th at 7:25. It looks like Brandon did that. And then Kyle picked up the job, started working on the job at 7:30. So it's a way for him to not only, it's always nice to hold staff accountable, but sometimes you get customers who need to kind of have that layer of accountability too. And so sometimes as a business owner, being able to say, I can actually see that we did that. So it's some proof, here's the audit log. There's a breadcrumb trail, and I know when everything happens, so you don't get away with that. And there are other times where there are valid complaints, and he can go in here and see, well, it looks like the job was scheduled 5 days ago, but nobody's gotten the deposit. So I know exactly who to go to because each of these job log action needed types, those are directly correlative with various departments. So accounting, technicians, he knows which department to go to find the answers that he needs. So this is just 100% of this is in FileMaker. So I know we spent the first 40 minutes talking about JavaScript, but this is another piece of that email. Let me see if I can find it. Job log. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is it. So you just have to, what we paid attention to was pulling out all the fat, because at the beginning, clients have a tendency to go, well, I want to know everything. And it's like, well, Do you really need to know everything? If, you know, every single action that's ever taken on the job? And typically the answer is no. So the challenging piece is to kind of extract what's the most important breadcrumb trail, because if you tracked everything, it's going to become kind of overkill and useless. So for them, for shock therapy, it was really centered around gathering information, or I'm sorry, gathering money, getting money from clients, and major milestones in the accounting department, technician department, and now we're doing shipping department. So now we're taking all of their online orders and we're handling all of their shipping. So this is a simple piece that you can stick into really any FileMaker, any project tracking FileMaker based system that makes things just really tidy and really easy for business owners to be able to see exactly when things, you know, when major milestones were hit on a particular job. So that leaves us with a few minutes left, and I'm happy to take any more questions, or, you know, talk about quilting museums, which I looked up, by the way, when you were telling us about that. I looked it up. It's real. I checked it out. So, okay. So someone's saying, so it's Twilio conversation method that you mentioned quickly. So the conversations, yeah. So in the FileMaker file that I showed you, that's me handling, attaching messages to an existing thread, checking to see whether or not a particular thread exists. If it does exist, go ahead and just attach this message. In fact, I can show you real quickly. Let me open that back up. Right here. Okay. So the database structure is thread owns messages, right? That's really it. So if a thread exists for a number, we check the number, then go ahead and attach that message to the thread. If not, go ahead and create a thread and then attach the message to that thread. That's all happening within FileMaker. I did it that way because the goal of the demo and of this component was to keep as much inside FileMaker as I possibly could. There is a Twilio native way to do this, and I'm trying to remember where they keep it. There's a whole, let me see. I think what I Googled was like Twilio text conversation thread. And I believe, yeah, so they call it a conversation. And I'll look in Node. And again, their documentation's wonderful. So it says, here's what you're going to need to make this happen. Here's an example file. Okay, so the way that this works is, how do you turn a handful of isolated messages to and from the same party into a true conversation? And you can extend that out to multiple parties too. So you have to remember state. Okay, so state is another layer, but basically, if you think of state in FileMaker as, I need to check to see if the thread exists before attaching a message to it, well, Twilio gives you a way to do that as well. There would be a lot more programming in Node, but it is a way that you could go ahead and just share the whole thread back and forth from FileMaker to Twilio, instead of when the message comes in from FileMaker figuring out where to put it. That's what you would do. So if you want, here, I'm going to get you in the chat. Here you go. There's the link to that particular piece. And it's one that I want to figure out. I haven't done it yet, but the documentation for Twilio is so good, it makes you want to just keep building stuff with it, because it's really simple. There's a bunch of videos on YouTube and other places that go through various tutorials or examples, or, just normal everyday programmers dealing with Twilio. And that's pretty much what I did. So I would highly recommend diving into their docs. But let's see, anything else? No more questions in the chat. But I'm glad that you guys thank you for having me. This was cool. I haven't really gotten to share this with very many folks, and I hope you liked it. So that's what I've got.
Great job, Jake.
Thank you.
If there aren't any other questions, I think we can probably, let me see if I can get this back. I will reclaim.
I think I've got it. Yeah, here you go.
There we go. We're going to take a little break, and we're going to break into the breakout rooms. so that we're going to, again, divide everybody up into some rooms. Hopefully you'll get to chat with somebody that you don't know, or maybe somebody you do know, for a few minutes. And then we'll be getting ready for Makah. One thing I want to share, this is just kind of a bit of an announcement. We in the FileMaker community lost an absolute princess of our community just a week or so ago. Shin Nanagawa, who's from Japan. Almost anybody who's been to a DevCon or a Pause on Air over the last couple of decades has seen her. She is, you know, what we have done for the FileMaker movement in Los Angeles at FMDiSC pales by comparison to what she's done for the entire country of Japan. She has just been such a huge ambassador. She's just she was the sweetest person ever, good heart, donated a lot of her time to a lot of DevCons. Any American developers that needed Japanese literature for their products in the FileMaker community, she was always first one to stick up her hand. She was just a peach of a person, and we lost her recently. So anyway, for those who didn't know, I wanted to let you know there is a Facebook page, kind of in memoriam, and everybody is posting kind of their thoughts and favorite pictures about her and so forth. So I just wanted to kind of share that with the community. She was really an important member of our extended family. So anyway, without further ado, we'll have other announcements anybody wants to have when we come back. We'll get ready for Makah, but we'll go into these breakout rooms for maybe about 10, 15 minutes, Jonathan. Is that about right?
Yeah, and you might want to pause the recording
Yeah.
now. So
Does anyone have any experience going to Big Sur with the web server and how that's been? Because I have a client who wants to, and I'm really nervous about it.
In WebDirect, you mean?
No, like just a web server, a PHP server.
And I'd like to know if you can run FileMaker 17 under Big Sur.
You can, but it's going to behave weirdly, right?
It's not blessed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not blessed. It hasn't received the...
Okay, I think we are at a good point. Again, thanks to Jake. Fantastic job on that first segment. We've got Makah. She is from Soliant Consulting, but more specifically, she's a recent Excellence Award winner for the fine work that she's done at Jointable, a nonprofit that has kind of paired up, nonprofits that have need with developers that have time. She's going to talk to us about that and show us some kind of fun little stuff that she and her cohorts are up to now. And let me see if I can get her pushed up as the host. There you go, Makah. Should be coming your way now.
And okay, perfect. Share screen. There it is. Can you all hear me?
I'm gonna mute. Is everybody else? Did we mute everybody else? You can mute everybody else if you want to, Makah.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me, Dave. And as you said, I am Makah Encarnacao from Soliant Consulting. I'm a senior technical project lead at Soliant. But I'm here to talk about my side gig at Jointable and our new initiative, which we're calling Diverse Table. Show you a little bit about where we're headed with Jointable, where we've been, where we're headed, and some geeky behind the hood stuff with the apps we're using. So what is Jointable? So you could definitely learn a lot more about Jointable at our website, jointable.org, which I have to give a huge shout out to Jake, who is part of our leadership team at Jointable, and he fixed up our website last night. So it looks a little bit better today than it did yesterday. So check out his awesome work at jointable.org. And so we are filing to become a 501c. We have we have pro bono lawyers working with us to follow the paperwork. So hopefully we'll be an official nonprofit pretty soon, the next couple months. And essentially what we are, as Dave said, is we're matchmakers. We really just match volunteers with a need. So there's several different needs I'm going to talk about in this session. Usually the needs have some sort of social impact in the tech community. So the first initiative we have here is what we're calling charitable. charity. So we're, like Dave said, we're matching nonprofits with developers. So basically, a nonprofit can come to our website, jointable.org, said, I can't afford any paid work, but I would really need help in this, and this is what I'm looking for, and here's where I am located, here's the languages I speak, and my time zone. And then again, a volunteer can sign up at jointable.org and say, I'd love to work with nonprofits that do this, this, and this, work with animals, help children, stuff like that. And these are my expertise areas where I'd like to donate my skills for, and I'd like to work with a team, or I would like to work by myself. So there's a bunch of different questions that we take into consideration before we make a match. I want to highlight just a couple of success stories that we have so far. So Abraham Creel is a children's home. It's an orphanage in South Africa. And we met with the directors, Christy at the bottom and Fred. And so they actually found us through the Context podcast. Jeremy Brown had us on there, and Fred listens to that podcast, and then he reached out to us for some help for his app. So get this, they're adorable. I love them, and they really we're so great to work with. What I love about
Makah, did we lose your audio?
We did.
Yeah, I can't hear her either.
Makah, we can't hear you.
The headset.
Hello?
I don't see her image either.
And she may not hear us if she's using the headset.
I take the hosting back from her.
Oh, there she is.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
There we
Hold
go.
on. Hold on, I'm going to put you back as host again now that you're back.
Okay.
Okay.
That
There
was
you go.
weird.
You got
I
it.
could hear everything you all were saying.
There you
Host
go.
voodoo.
Yeah. Hopefully that's the worst of it. All right.
It's all over.
Okay. So what was the last thing you heard me say? Because I kept
Talking about the orphanage.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're adorable.
So they're adorable. And did you hear about the Context podcast, that part where they learned
Yes.
about us? Okay. And did you hear about that the app we're replacing was created in DOS?
No.
No. Okay. That's a part
Sounds
the internet.
painful.
Yeah, that's the part the internet didn't like. Okay. So the app they are replacing was created in DOS. Fred actually built it himself many, many years ago. It actually predates the mouse. So they can't use a mouse with this app. They can only navigate with the keyboard. And the breaking point for them was that they couldn't print anymore, because the only operating system that would run their DOS app they couldn't find a printer that would support that old of an operating system. So that was when they were like, okay, so might be time to move on at this point. So we did an intake with them, and we matched them up with Matt Hintz, Josie Graham, and CJ Carberry. And they built a fun little app, which I will show you some screenshots here. Essentially, it's very simple, just tracking requests that come in for the children. The home is multiple houses, and so each house has several children living in it, and then they have like a what they call a house mother, and the house mother will make requests on behalf of each child. For example, like somebody needs a new shirt, and so they can put in the request here, and then it gets approved, and they have several warehouse buildings where then somebody can go, once it's approved, somebody can go grab the item and bring it to the correct house. So it's a simple app, and they're right now in testing, so almost done with it, and they're ecstatic with it. So a big change from what they had before, and they're really especially happy to be able to use a mouse and print. So the other project that stood out to me was this project here with that Eric Franciscus brought to our attention. He is from Lemberg, Germany, and his wife works with children who have Down syndrome, and his goddaughter has Down syndrome. And he was explaining to us that children with Down syndrome, two things: they love technology, like they're so fascinated with the iPad. I think lots of children are like that, but especially children with Down syndrome, and also they're so visual. And so he proposed the idea of creating an app that is essentially flashcards with images and text under the image to help children with Down syndrome learn words. So, for example, you can have an image of a dog and then the word dog under it, and then the mom can read the word, and then the child will interact, and they can swipe for the next flashcard. And the idea is that it would give parents autonomy to create their own flashcards. So they can take a picture of daddy and type in daddy under it, and then the child can kind of play with that flashcard and learn the word daddy that way. So we were lucky to have in our database a developer in Germany. So we have Joachim Mueller, who we met with him and talked to him about this project idea. And you can imagine be something pretty simple and easy and fun to build on the iPad. So so he gladly took that project up, and last I heard, it's going well. I should probably check in and see if I can get a more recent update, but seems to be going really well. So those are just two examples of projects that came out of Charitable. So another initiative we have is something we kind of talked about already, is the Claris COVID response team partnership, which we're calling Response Table. And if you attended Engage, you probably are a little bit familiar with this, but essentially what it is, it's charitable, but for COVID related apps. So an example is we had a request come in from a dentist in France, and he just needed a way to triage dental emergencies, when everything was locked down and they needed to take in requests for emergencies, and then determine who was going to take on this request, or who are we going to assign this patient to in Paris. So that was an example. I will say Beeswax, we had so much great response from the community, including a bunch of you who are on this call. And Beeswax was like, really took everything that we threw with them. They were so generous of their time. Jay and Vince were really amazing. And Geist worked with, it's funny, perfect fitting of your Twilio demo, Jake, because Geist helped Dr. Fine with a texting app, which is perfect example use case of where the Twilio integration would be amazing. But essentially that was a way to prevent the elderly community specifically from actually going into the hospital. Instead, they could text a doctor and say, here are my symptoms. The doctor can say, okay, let me check on you in a couple of days. Do you have a fever? Tell me a little bit more. And it's just a way to prevent people from actually coming into the doctors and going in when a real MD actually thinks that they need to come in and be seen. So we did a video about the different projects, success stories from the Claris COVID response team and for Engage. So you can see that video, and you can see more very specific examples and some behind the scenes stuff there if you're interested in learning more about that. But what I really came here to talk to you about is our new initiative. So this is our third, brand new one, which we are doing in collaboration with Women Innovating Together, and it is called Diversitable. So this is the Diversitable team. We've been meeting weekly for many, many months now. We're hoping to launch hopefully next week. We're really, really close. And what Diversitable is, essentially, it's a very structured mentorship program. We want to help you build a roadmap, which is the app that I'm going to demo for you after this. And we have a bunch of resources that we've gathered together for learning FileMaker, for really anything that has to do with growing your technical skills and also increasing diversity in the tech community. We also want to help with resume review and assistance. We have a great app that actually Beth wrote, who is in this meeting, for building a custom resume and getting in FileMaker and then export it out into a PDF. And so we can help build resumes. We can help tweak your resumes, spruce them up. Interview preparation skills we want to give to our participants. So, like mock interviews or tips on how to be successful in interviews, and networking. We have such a great community here and inside the Claris network, and we want to be able to introduce newcomers to opportunities that they might not be able to find on their own. My long-term goal is to potentially have a place on Jointable's website where organizations can basically have a job posting and say, oh, hey, this is an opening we have. And then we can help our participants apply to those job postings. And like I mentioned before, Women Innovating Together has been really a huge part of this initiative and is offering 1 year free membership to all participants who are women, all Diversitable participants. So the program is for beginners, switchers, and growers. So people who are brand new to tech, people who lost their job maybe because of COVID and they're looking to get into the tech industry, or someone who's already in the tech industry and they really need help advancing their careers or taking it to the next level. So I want to talk a little bit about what the Diversitable process would look like. So imagine you're a tabler. So that's what we're calling our the people who signed up to be part of the program, our applicants. We're calling them tablers. So let's say you lost your job because of COVID and you want to get into the tech industry. You feel like it's booming and you have a lot of interest and you just want to maybe dip your toe in, or you're ready, like you feel like Claris is the platform. And so what we'll do is, or what the tabler will do is come to our website, fill out our intake form where we ask a bunch of questions, and then we'll look at people who volunteered to be a mentor, which we're calling an ambassador. So an ambassador is going to be someone who is going to help our tabler along the way. And based off the interest and the needs from our tabler and our ambassador, we try to find a really good fit, as well as obviously like language and time zones, and ideally not too far from each other, make things a little bit easier logistically. And the third member of this group is an advisor. So an advisor is somebody specifically from Jointable. And so you're going to have an advisor assigned to each pair. And what we'll do is we'll schedule a meeting or essentially like a kickoff. And we want to create a roadmap. So we really want to put as least amount of work on the ambassador as possible. So we want to help create this roadmap. What's our end goal for our tabler? And what are all the milestones that will get us there? So we want to kind of create this roadmap, and then once that's been created, the ambassador and the tabler together can meet those milestones, and the ambassador is going to be there for support and for answering questions, or just being a cheerleader, like just saying like, you got this. That is really our process, what our process is like. And then the advisor is going to be there at any point for support or questions, or if there's any time an ambassador doesn't know the answer, an advisor will be there for support.
Makah, I didn't quite understand the difference between the ambassador and the advisor.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So good question. The ambassador is essentially going to be a volunteer. So it's going to be someone who's going to be more hands-on with the tabler. So it's essentially is the mentor that's going to be hands-on and potentially, meet monthly or biweekly or whatever cadence makes sense for the two together. But make sure that there's progress being made and hands-on. The advisor is going to be somebody from the join table team who's there as a resource for both of you to, if you get stuck or if you're not sure what the process looks like, or let's say you need help with licensing or, anything like that, anything that the join table side can do to help, you would reach out to your advisor for that. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So any other questions on this before I jump to the next slide? Okay. So I do want to show you a little bit about the app that I created on how to build up that roadmap. But before I jump out of Keynote, I want to point out a couple of other things. How to participate if you are interested in volunteering to be a mentor, or if you would like to grow your own career, please check out diversetable.org, which I will give a happy shout out to Jake, who also made that site really a lot better than it was before Jake touched it. And if you're interested in helping behind the scenes, like if you're interested in being part of the join table team, please email us at gmail.com. We are actually actively looking for a DBA, someone to help us manage all of our apps and make sure that they all play nicely together. All of our apps, we want to try to make them accessible on WebDirect so that somebody who doesn't have FileMaker can still log in and manage their own accounts. Well, at least not have FileMaker initially when they first sign up. They should have it by the end. And we're definitely looking for a website help to help writing content on our website. And also advisors. So if you don't think you can commit time to helping a mentor, helping a mentee, helping a tabler on a really regular basis, but maybe you think you would be really good at helping create a roadmap. Like you have a lot of connections and you feel like I could totally help these people make a really nice path to success. We definitely would love help with the advisor role as well. You can also participate just by spreading the word. Follow us on social media, and then also anyone that you think could benefit from this program, let them know that it exists. So with that, I'm going to jump into the app. So everyone can still hear me, right? Hopefully. Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So when I was thinking about how I was going to build something where it was basically like a roadmap, my first thought was JavaScript and a web viewer, and I was like, well, maybe I'll do something with Carafe because I've used Carafe before, and I know it's very simple, and I could just stick something in a web viewer. And I had used this one, this breadcrumbs trail, which is kind of similar to a roadmap, I thought. So they had this option here, which was similar enough, but I don't know, embarrassing or I should be proud of this. I built this during the holiday break, and I realized I would have zero Carafe support during the holiday break. So I was like, well, maybe I won't go that route because it doesn't have exactly everything I need. So I decided to just build it directly in FileMaker. So first, I guess let me show you what it would look like. So if I was to come here and see all my pet stops, imagine we're meeting with the tabler and we're trying to figure out, okay, what is the path we want this tabler to take? Let's say this tabler is brand new to the Claris platform, and let's just give them an intro. We'll start with an intro. So I'll add that. I would like them to be at least intermediate, so we'll add that as well. Would be great. They're super interested in FileMaker Go, or sorry, in mobile design, so we'll add that. Would be great to get certified at some point, so we'll add that as well. And then I'm thinking, well, let me just look at my other options here. My tabler is a woman, and she gets a free year membership. Why not? Let's add join women innovating together with that. And I would love for eventually this tabler to be employed. Like that's really why they came, or maybe it's even just internships. They wanna have an internship inside a Claris position. So let's spruce up their resume, and then let's prepare them for job interviews, and then apply for internships. So here we go. We build a roadmap, and if there is something in here that doesn't exist, I can create my own pit stop here, and I can even select from a bunch of images that I stole from the internet. I'm gonna just cancel out of there. So now I kind of decided, here's my map that I want to go. And so I'm going to click on the first one. What specific items, what specific tasks do we want to accomplish for our tabler for us to consider this pit stop complete? So maybe it's watch what is it, Claris Academy videos 1 through, I don't even know how many there are. We'll just say 15. So maybe that's the goal we want for this. And there could be a list of items here. And one of my goals for this app is eventually having a bunch of like pre-selected options here. So maybe it's Quasar, or maybe it's Chris Eppolite's training or something like that. There's many ways we could all learn Claris platform materials. So once I feel like this is done, I will consider this complete, and then I will then move on to the next item. And the goal is to really create all the steps for each one before starting the process. So the tabler, the ambassador, and the advisor would come in here and create the roadmap, and then decide what are the steps that we should take to complete these. And maybe the advisor is going to say, I'll gather some materials for you that would be useful for this, and things like that. You might want to change the order too. So if I'm joining women innovating together, I should do that right away. So by default, there's 15 max. So everything is an order of 15, but I'll change this to 1, and then that should bring it to the top there. And then once I have joined, I can say that is complete, and that will finish this out for me. And the idea is obviously that a roadmap is going to change over time. It's not going to, it's probably not going to stay the same day one as it is at the very end. So there's definitely a lot of flexibility, and a user could log in even via WebDirect right now and update their own roadmap, or an advisor can log into. All right, so I did want to show is how I built this. So I know Jake was saying, okay, so is it a bunch of hide conditions? And like, that's kind of true, but it's actually pretty simple. It's this is all a portal, and all I'm showing is individual portals, but I'm only showing one row of each portal, and I'm starting at, so this one starts at 50, and this one only shows row 14, and this one only shows row 13, etc. And then I have a hide condition. I think the only hide condition is the outline that I have here.
Makah?
Yes.
So the objects are linked, each one is linked to a different portal.
Yep. These are all
Okay.
portals.
Trying to grasp that.
Yep. Yeah, so yeah, it is, let's see if I do like Control All, you might see like all the different portal boxes. But yeah,
so you're
like,
using hiding as a condition to move to each one?
Nope. So the only hide condition I have actually is this blue outline, because we can't do conditional formatting of a border, unfortunately. So that is an object that hides if it's not the currently selected portal row. And also I'm using conditional formatting to turn it green based off the status. And then that's the only hide condition is that. So these are each individual portals only showing one row, and these are objects within the portal. So the image is stored inside the record. The name, the pit stop name is stored within the record, and that's it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Very crafty, by the way.
Yeah, thanks. I was like, this is almost better than JavaScript. Well, at least it's easier for me to manage it. It was actually kind of cool because I can still, even though these are all different portals, I can select a bunch of these and align them nice, and so I can make them all match, even though they were all coming from different portal objects. That is kind of the interesting thing on this app. Let's see how I'm doing on time. Okay, so I only have 3 minutes. I'll open it up to questions at this point. I did have another app that I could show, but I'm gonna suggest that the creator Beth maybe present on it at some point. But she built a really cool app for the resume. So basically, she broke down each individual part of a resume into text objects, and then with a bunch of merging and things like that, have it spit out into really nice PDFs. And the nice thing about that is, you know, as some of you know, some of you probably forgot because you've been in your job for so long, but you might want to have different text or different positions or different history in your resume based off where you're applying. So we can really easily tweak resumes to be very specific for a specific job. Once we have everything in FileMaker, and then it's basically a picker, and you can pick what goes inside your resume. So it's another really cool app that Beth created. So I think I'm gonna stop and take a look at questions. Let me take a look here. Can't hear Makah. Okay, whoops, sorry about that. Okay, fans of Betty White, nice. Awesome, okay, people like the UI, thank you. Okay, I don't really see any questions though. I love the feedback, thank you very much.
I do have a question, Makah, if you don't mind me interrupting. So in the pairing that you envision with the in between a mentor and a tabler, is that something that sticks through the whole roadmap, or is it more like you would pair based on expertise? Because I saw some of the items that you have there where it could be that a mentor will have very good guidance on a specific topic, but may not be the best one to be paired with for something else altogether. And I think we have to acknowledge that there's also many different paths for the tablers themselves. I mean, you said some will be seeking employment, some may be trying to kickstart their own thing. So I'm just trying to see how it's been envisioned.
Yes, that's a great question. So since we haven't actually kicked off yet, my goal is to have at least one essentially head ambassador, so one head mentor, and then if there is a point, so I guess let me see if I come over here to the diverse table section, and if I sign up here, if I show you the sign up sheet, become a tabler, and this is all web direct. So the volunteer form is pretty similar with the tech focus area and what they're looking for in mentorship. Well, our goal is to find the closest match, and if there very likely won't be somebody that's a perfect match, at that point we could bring somebody else in to step in for any holes that are missing. But I would love to have like one like base person or a head, I guess, like a head ambassador, and then potentially add in anybody else as needed. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Makah, this is Jesse. I have a couple questions.
Sure.
One, is there any tie-in between Jointable and Soliant?
Only that they're a sponsor. That's
okay.
really it. Yeah.
Okay. And what are the So like when you were doing your roadmap, for instance, you
Uh-huh.
talked about like a training course, like maybe they would sign up for,
Yeah.
you know, this or that training course. Is the intention to provide free training resources, or is it more for the tabler to pay for these training resources? And what would be the overlap between, you
Yeah.
know, various paid training courses versus
Right.
resources that you would want to make available for
Yeah.
free?
That's such a great question. So the answer is we don't really know yet. I think at this point, it's going to be up to what the it's yeah, I think if there is something that is at this point, if there is something that's going to cause money, it is probably going to be up to the tabler. However, once we become a 501c, we would love to, you know, raise money so that our tablers don't have to pay for any training. Um, and what else was I going to say about that?
And do you foresee Jointable as having its own kind of like training resources, or do you foresee
Mm,
Jointable as being more of a kind of a networking
mhm,
between
mhm.
here are some resources you should go take a look at?
Yes. I think it's going to be, I think at this point, more of a networking. Yeah, there's
Okay.
already so much great material out there. I don't think it really makes sense for us to start anything from scratch. Um, although I will say a
So
couple things. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't interrupt. But the ambassador's job is more to say, here are some really good resources you should go take a look at,
Right.
not so much, hey, let's spend 2 hours on the phone next Wednesday so I can teach you about how security works.
That is correct. So, well, Join Table's job is going to be here's some really great resources. Ambassador's job is going to be okay. Let's use this one because this one's what I'm comfortable with, and you know, or I recommend this one. I have experience with it. And then the ambassador's job is like, if you have any questions, come to me. If you don't
Mhm.
understand something, come to me. If you want to talk something out, let's check in on your progress, how you're doing with the roadmap, things like that. But we're not expecting our ambassadors to sit down and teach, you know, from ground zero, anything like that. So it's more like a mentor with as much resources as Jointable can provide you. Does that make sense?
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. I will also say that we are partnering up with a couple other organizations. So Blackson Technology is one of our partners, and they are offering to pay for any certification for any tabler from the Black community. And also, Boys and Girls Club is partnering up with us, and so we will be getting participants from that. And I don't know if there's any funds for them to potentially pay for um, anything, but that may be a possibility. So it's really going to be on a tabler by tabler basis on who pays for what. But I will say it's not on the ambassador whatsoever to pay for anything. It's more you're volunteering your time to just make sure to be a resource if they have any questions and to be a supportive cheerleader for this person, a welcoming face into the community.
Cool. Thank you.
Any other questions about that or anything else?
Actually, yes, Makah, also, so because I see that the website is up and everything.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious in terms of, aside from the signups, is there any other roadblocks that are there that need to, like, say someone signs up tomorrow, like in terms of their experience, I'm guessing you're still signing up also for mentors and everything. So, but aside from the sign up parts, is everything ready to go, or are there other components that that are need to take place? So that's one question, and a separate question would be the roadmap by itself is often expressed as linear, although in how it may roll out, it could be that there's a lot of things that will end up being in parallel. So I just want to see what's your take on all of that.
Yeah, that was harder to build in Portal. So, but yes, so yeah, your first question, we are pretty much ready. I think we're hopefully gonna make like a big like a social media push starting next week. So the biggest holdups for us is just finishing up our website, making sure there's not typos and things like that. So if you do see anything weird about the website as you're poking through there, please email us at jointableteam@gmail.com so we can get that fixed. But that's one of our big holdups. This app is ready. Besides the things I want to add to it, and then also the resume building app is almost ready. So I would say we're about 90% there, but we don't feel like we have to have everything 100% before we launch. So we're ready right now to start gaining interest and getting people signed up. And of course, we're all volunteers on this team, so we are just going to fly with it, like Julie always says, and I love this. We're gonna build the plane as we're flying it. So we're just gonna go and see what happens and fix things that are broken along the way and do the best we can. And it's not really like a paid client where you want to make sure everything's 100% right before you launch. No, we're all volunteers and we're like, okay, we're just gonna go. We're just gonna jump. So. And then as far as your linear question, I totally, I did think about that. It was a little bit harder to build. I find you can definitely say like I'm in the intro, but my certification is maybe in progress. So you can state it that way. And you could even say that this is complete before you like maybe go really deep into mobile or whatever. So there's nothing really stopping you from doing it in the order that it places it in. So that was kind of my way of giving you lots of flexibility. But yeah, I guess it doesn't look as branchy as like a real roadmap would.
No, it's analogies, and I think the roadmap is good because in terms of onboarding process, it's going to have someone feel secure that there's something laid out. If all you see is just a forest of many branches, then it's difficult to know where to go. So I think there's really good news about the fact that it's expressed as a roadmap. I just didn't know how much of it was tied to actual completion and not, and you just answered the question. So thank you.
Sure, no problem. And I really think that the end goal might change throughout this process. You might find that like maybe you get Wim as your mentor ambassador and you're like, oh my gosh, I love servers almost as much as he does. And so you're going to totally switch what your roadmap is going to be like. So yeah, it's very flexible. It's just kind of a guide for, to get to start with. My goal was really I wanted to do I wanted to put in as little pressure as possible for the mentor, for the ambassador. I wanted to do as much work on our side that we could. And so I was hoping that this one, no one loves servers as much as Wim does. That's true. So that's what I was hoping this would accomplish.
Okay.
Yes.
When you receive your 501c3 and begin to solicit contributions,
yes,
remember that the second version of the CARES Act that was passed a month or so ago will allow for a $600 above the line deduction on personal income taxes. And so you can use that as an additional incentive to help you raise funds.
Oh, well, that's definitely good to know. Thank you. Yeah, hopefully we get approved in the next couple months. That would be amazing. One idea we have a massive list of ideas for Join Table, but as you're in an organization, you maybe have hardware that you don't need anymore, and instead of throwing it out or getting rid of it, you could potentially donate it to Join Table, and we may have a tabler who doesn't have a laptop or doesn't have any hardware at all to learn on, and we could can shift that donation over to a tabler. So we definitely have lots of ideas, and we're really excited about where we're going, and there's definitely a lot of work to be done, but we're happy with what we've done so far, and hopefully this will be successful and we can get a lot more people interested in the Claris platform, and especially more diverse groups. Any other questions?
Seems really cool.
Thanks. All right, so I'll stop sharing and hand off the torch.
Thank you, Makah. That was actually fantastic. Both in terms of what you guys have done, where you guys are going, and just a kind of glimpse under the hood of how you're keeping it all working and running. So I hope we get some really good participation and some interest in your group. It's just like I said, it's really kind of fun to see what you guys are doing. All right, guys, I think we're the anchor leg of the meeting. We are going to throw to a longtime FMDiSC member and Mac aficionado, Mr. Phil Goodman. He's going to tell us all sorts of things that we don't know about Catalina and Big Sur operating systems and how they impact our world. So please welcome Mr. Phil Goodman.
Hey, thank you. So we're gonna race through this. There's a lot to cover, so I apologize for keeping you over a little bit. Maybe we'll end about 12:15, 12:20 or so. I'm gonna be playing with some video production software. So forgive me for playing with some of the toys that I have here that allows me to do some of these things and feed it into Zoom, which is kind of fun. I'm going to jump right in about significant Mac updates that have come out in the last few years. It turns out that a lot of you are doing IT work for your clients. You might have an IT company or division in a company you're working with one of your clients, but maybe you are the IT. So there's some things that you need to know about the most recent versions of Mac OS. There's so much, but we're only going to have time to cover a few of the little highlights here. Chances are you're using one of these updates, one of these operating systems all the way through Catalina. This is the Mac OS 10 all the way through Mac OS 10.x version, and Big Sur introduced Mac OS 11. Chances are, again, you may not be on Big Sur yet. So there's some things you need to know both about Catalina and Big Sur. The operating systems have been introduced with the Mac originally as 32-bit operating systems, and 10.8 Mountain Lion introduced it as a fully 64-bit kernel. And we've been moving forward ever since as a 64-bit operating system. And that's what we're working towards for everything. And Catalina and Big Sur have really made a big difference there. What does that mean? A 32-bit operating system really means, as far as the user is concerned, that each application can only use up to 4 gigabytes of memory, of RAM. So you might have a computer with 16 or 20 or 40 or 64 gigs of RAM, but if you're running a 32-bit application, that application can only address 4 gigabytes at a time. So if it needs to use more, it's going to be using a lot of virtual memory and spilling onto the hard drive and swapping back and forth. Now that the operating system can do 64 bits for many years, and as the applications have all gotten upgraded to 64 bits, each application can now address 16 billion gigabytes of RAM. I don't know if anybody has that. Raise your hand if you do or approaching that, but that's going to be a while before we run into that limit. What does that mean? Well, as a 64-bit operating system, we can address more memory per application. The efficiency is much greater. It's greater by using more RAM in the system as a whole. There's a lot less virtual memory, a lot less disk swapping. So everything works quicker and faster. All the processing is done in RAM rather than having to swap back and forth using virtual memory on the disk. And of course, with a lot less work that the processors and the disks and everything have to work with, the computer can stay cooler as well. And if you're running on a laptop on battery, of course, you're going to save some battery power. About 7 or 8 years ago, at the Worldwide Developer Conference, WWDC, Apple told all the developers we're going to move to a 64-bit operating system in the future. Make sure your apps are no longer 32-bit, that they're 64-bit. We won't accept any more 32-bit apps on the App Store. And they said at some point in the future, our operating system will only allow 64-bit applications. Well, that point in the future is now. And by FileMaker 15, I believe FileMaker 15 was the first version that was 64-bit only. So that required a 64-bit operating system, which is kind of cool. So that FileMaker 14 was 32-bit and 64, but you had to go to the get info box to select whether it was going to be a 32 or 64-bit. The significant thing here is if you're using older versions of FileMaker with that are 64-bit, but you're still trying to figure out why your 32-bit plugins don't work. That's because you don't have the latest versions of the plugins, obviously, that have to be 64-bit. So what happened when you have an operating system that can do 32 and 64? Well, that's Mojave. Mojave can still run 32-bit operating systems and 64-bit operating systems, 64-bit applications. And I suspect that many of you are still on Mojave. It can run FileMaker, latest versions of FileMaker, and that's great, and older applications, and that might be why you're still there. And that's something that applies to a lot of people I've encountered. This is a message in Mojave that you will encounter or have encountered if you're going to double click on an application that is a 32-bit application. It works, but it tells you that it's not optimized for your Mac. So that's the easy way of telling you upgrade, get that app, because get that app on a new version, because on a future version, this 32-bit application will not work. I use this particular application specifically, Business Card Composer, because the author, the developer of that app, never made a 64-bit application. So this is common. Some people are using 64-bit apps and have some older 32-bit apps that they want to keep along with them. And when they go to operating systems after Mojave, those apps won't work at all, and they have no alternatives. So you have to look around to see whether or not that's a solution for you to move to something else. What I have done is I've created some virtual memory, virtual disks. I use VMware. I've created some VMs that run older versions of the Mac OS. So if I do need older versions of FileMaker for that matter, or this application, Business Card Composer or whatever, I can still run those. So Catalina is a purely 64-bit application, and it only runs 64 bits. So you have to have, in this operating system, you have to make sure all your apps are 64-bit. And if you are going to run a 32-bit application in Catalina and you double click it, this is what you're going to see. It says the app now needs to be updated. It will not work. Contact the developer. Period. So it won't work at all. How do you know whether your apps are 32-bit or 64? So I'm going to use this screenshot here in High Sierra. If you go to the Apple menu and you choose About This Mac, it will normally tell you statistics about the Mac, which is great, RAM and storage and all that kind of stuff. But if you hold down the Option key, About This Mac switches to System Information. So when you do that and you bring up the System Information application, when you let go, this is what you'll see. You might have seen this before. And most people go here just to look at the hardware specs of the computer. But if you scroll down from the hardware down to the software section and you click on Applications, what you'll see on the rightmost column in all versions of macOS all the way up to Mojave, you'll see a column that says 64-bit. And if the application is 64-bit, it will say yes. So scroll down the whole list until you find something that's a no. So you'll say, oh, that's an application that I need to get rid of and upgrade to a 64-bit app. There are many ways that you can do that and identify which apps are 32 on your system. This is one way. I actually prefer another application rather than the built-in one from Apple. The one I like is a program called Go64. It's free. You can donate to the developer at stclairsoft.com, St. Clair Software. And the way this works is you open it up and there's a pop-up right there in the middle that says show 32-bit only. So you just basically have it scan your computer and it will tell you every application on your system that is a 32-bit application. And at the bottom, you'll see the little status that gives you the path as to where that application actually is. And some of these are not just in your application folder. They're in the library under application support. Maybe there's launch daemons, maybe they're in the preferences or some other areas of your system that you might have to go through and dig through. Your goal is to get this down to 0 and have nothing in this list. You might have a few things from Apple, but that's okay, because once you upgrade to Catalina or Big Sur, Apple will replace those 32-bit components with 64-bit ones. Now, in conjunction with Go64, I also like to use a free app called Appcleaner, because what Appcleaner does when it lets you remove, when you normally install an application uninstall an application for the Mac, it wants you to just throw away the app from the applications folder. You just drag and drop it, might ask you for a password, and that's it, it's gone. But it leaves behind a whole bunch of plists, a whole bunch of files in the library, maybe files in application support. And what Appcleaner does, let's say there's this program called Discovery here that I want to get rid of. I know it's a 32-bit application. I drag and drop it into the Appcleaner window. When you double click Appcleaner, all it does is it opens a window, and you drag and drop the application. So not only does it identify the application, but it identifies all the components of that application that needs to be removed, that are left behind. And that way, you know that it's entirely gone. All of its components are entirely gone.
Phil, sorry, does it leave the data though?
Yeah, well, this is just the application component. So depending on what the app is, if you're saving files on your desktop or in your documents folder, those files are completely independent of the application. So it's not going to touch any of your documents. Documents, as far as I'm concerned, are not 32 or 64-bit. It's the application and the code behind the app that you're trying to get rid of.
Phil, a quick question. It's displaying where the components are. Does it delete them for you, or do you have to go track them down?
Yep. Remember,
Okay.
You see how it has a check mark next to all the individual components? If you don't do anything and just click the remove button in the bottom right corner, it will delete all of those. If you want to keep one specific file, say there's a plist file that you know has all your settings, you can keep that file by unchecking it. And then when you install a new version of the application, it might read that file and retain all your settings.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So in addition to 32-bit versus 64, one of the new things that they've introduced is a new file system. This file system conversion is a big deal. And this is automatically done for you when you upgrade to a new operating system that uses APFS. Depending on the hardware of your computer, whether you have a solid state drive or a fixed hard drive, a spinning hard drive, different versions of the operating system will convert to APFS depending on the hardware. It is a new generation of a file system. It was actually introduced first in iOS and watchOS. And since Apple has many more devices out there using iOS, they use that as a test run to see how the conversion to APFS works on a live OS upgrade. So they did this several years ago, and you didn't even know. You didn't even know it happened, both on iOS and watchOS. It converted from the older HFS Plus file system that we've had on the Mac since version 8.1. And it overcomes a ton of limitations. We could go and spend all day talking about all the little things that it does, but I'm not going to do that. We're just going to talk about the fact that it converts it and overcomes a lot of those limitations. APFS was originally intended and optimized for SSD drives because they're so much faster, but there are some limitations in HFS Plus that don't allow SSD drives to work as fast as they could. So Apple has rewritten the whole file system to take advantage of SSDs. And that's why with, I think it was Sierra, when we upgraded to Sierra, that was the first operating system that will convert your SSD to APFS. And we waited a few more versions before they did that with fixed hard drives. The other thing with APFS is that it actually has encryption built in. You don't have to say, I want my hard drive encrypted. It will automatically encrypt the hard drive. If you use something like File Vault, you are doubly encrypting your hard drive, which is actually cool. But your hard drive is already encrypted, just the very nature of using the APFS file system. I think somebody was saying something. Did somebody have a question?
Yeah, I was going to say, from what I've seen, you got to do the Sierra and the High Sierra to get the firmware updates. And I believe one of those will actually do the conversion, will automatically, do the conversion on APFS from the former.
If you are, let's say you're on El Capitan and you skipped Sierra, you never got the APFS until you get to High Sierra. So yes, the conversion will happen on any operating system above Sierra that works with the type of storage that you have. And this is why it's always important to use the Apple installer instead of restoring with a disk image of an existing drive, because the actual installer is the only one that will do firmware upgrades, and the firmware upgrades are not available separately. So always use an Apple installer to upgrade. Don't clone another system that has been already upgraded. Really, really important to do that. Pros with using APFS, much faster. If you're duplicating files or folders, it's almost instantaneous. If you hit Command D to duplicate something, even if it's 150 gigs, boom, it's like instantly duplicated. Because of the way they're doing the linking of the files on the system, it's very, very fast. Not physically duplicating, it's just noting changes to the original ones so that it makes references to the original files with changes. It also increases the maximum number of files that you can have on a disk. Not something we'll ever have to worry about, which is good. And space sharing on a disk, which means a physical hard drive or SSD drive doesn't have to be partitioned by you and fixed forever. The partitioning can be done dynamically by the system as it needs more and more space. And you can handle that. Again, more details about what that can be done are on the developer site from Apple and more tech notes, but I'm not going to get into that. There are some cons and some gotchas you got to worry about. Like I said, you can only get APFS on an SSD if you are on 10.12 Sierra or higher. If you have a fixed hard drive or a fusion drive, which uses a SSD and a hard drive together, that was introduced with Mojave. And you don't really have a choice. It just does it for you. You don't even notice it's happening, and it's flawless. So it just does it. It was remarkable how Apple changed the entire file system. This is like on Windows, going from some FAT32 or something like that all the way up to NTFS, and just do it in place without anybody even noticing. I don't remember that happening so smoothly. This is fantastic. Some other things, gotchas though, that you have to be worried about is that if you were using Boot Camp, it's an APFS partition volume with Boot Camp doesn't work. So you can partition a hard drive. I hate using the word partition because it's not really partitioning. You're using what are called now containers and volumes. You can have a container be set up as containing both an APFS volume and an HFS plus volume on the same physical drive, and have Boot Camp on the HFS plus portion. And that's kind of cool. Another thing that's really, really important for networking, and this applies for like a lot of people. If you are networking and you are using Apple File Protocol on a network, you just go to the Go menu and you say connect to server, and you have been using Apple File Protocol, AFP, to connect to a server, and the server is now using an operating system that has APFS for the partitioning, for the file structure of that hard drive. That drive that's being shared cannot be connected to with AFP. You have to use SMB networking, server message block, which is what's used typically in the Windows world. Apple will do both AFP and SMB, but it will only share via SMB on an APFS formatted drive. If you have an external drive, you can format that one as HFS plus, and only shares on that external drive can then be connected to by clients using AFP. I'm running through a lot of stuff, but I hope that makes sense. Until Big Sur, if you have an external drive and you're back doing a time machine backup to an external drive, you can't format that drive as APFS. It has to be formatted as the traditional HFS Plus to be compatible with Time Machine. And Time Machine will tell you, it says I can't back up to this drive, it needs to reformat. That changes with Big Sur. Big Sur can use external drives that are formatted as APFS. Another thing that's really important to understand is the security that Apple's implemented here. You have a dedicated system volume with Catalina and now with Big Sur. So if you look in disk utility and you notice on the left side, on a system that's running Catalina or Big Sur, you now have two icons for the hard drive. That hard drive has now been automatically split into two volumes. One is Macintosh HD and one is Macintosh HD Data. And Macintosh HD is where the operating system has now been put by Apple. And the data volume is where all your stuff and everything that you install on the computer, including applications and stuff that your applications install, like library stuff, everything goes into data. So the idea is that the Macintosh HD volume is read-only. And you can see a little bit more about it. If you choose that little pop-up that says view, you can say show all devices, not just the volumes. When you say show all devices, it shows you up there the physical SSD. It's a 2 terabyte SSD internal to the computer. And that has a single container in it. And the container has been split into the Macintosh HD volume, that is the operating system only, and Macintosh HD, which is your stuff that you can add and modify. That other little thing that's indented under Macintosh HD is the restore partition. So the recovery partition, so you can boot from that and reinstall or wipe the whole computer. That's a whole lesson in and of itself. That's what this is. But notice they all take up that same 2 terabyte container. And it shows you that this little part is only holding about 15 gigs. Other things that are important are kernel extensions. For security, now with Catalina and now especially with Big Sur, Apple has eliminated kernel extensions. With security in mind, you might install an application, already have existing applications that are on the computer. And when you upgrade, some of the applications may not work properly. And that's because you have to bless some of the components of the application. So you go to the security and privacy pane, and you might see on the general tab, software from whoever the developer is was blocked from loading. If it's more than one developer, more than one piece of code, it'll say from multiple developers. You have to click the allow button and it'll give you a list with a checkbox next to each one that you want to bless to allow those apps from working. The idea here is that Apple does not want you to have anything on your computer running that you don't know about. You have to explicitly tell it, okay. And they've done the same thing with applications. So you might have seen this before. On a phone, for those of you who don't use a Mac, but on a phone, you might have seen when you install a new application on an iPhone, that application says this application would like access to your photos, or this application would like access to your contacts, or so on and so on. Well, Apple's now doing that on the Mac. So even if it's an app that you've had on the Mac and has been working all along, when you upgrade to Catalina and now Big Sur, you have to go to the privacy pane and accept by putting a little checkbox here next to every single thing that you want that app to have access to. So it starts with location services, and in the bottom left, you have to unlock it, which means you have to be an administrator. And then when you go down to camera, you'll see all the applications that have to be blessed to allow your camera. This is why when you upgrade to a new OS, Catalina or Big Sur, things like Zoom might not work. So you have to go into the camera and in microphone and turn on the checkbox for each of the applications that will be using those resources. Similarly, you also have to go down into things like accessibility and turn that on for applications, and full disk access. So you might have disk utilities that need access to parts of your computer, and they won't work until you turn these things on. Things like Zoom. and Ecamm, which is the video software I'm using, the little broadcast studio software I'm using. That all these things use a new feature called screen recording to relay what is being captured on the screen to the application. And we want to allow those apps to have that. They want you to know which applications are using a screen recording API. So that's important for you to know there. Big Sur is macOS 11. It's no longer a 10.x operating system. And as far as I'm concerned, Apple's saying this is the biggest change in the Mac since macOS 10. I don't think so. I think Catalina was the biggest change. And I think for whatever reason, they decided to name macOS 11 Big Sur one version late as macOS 11. I think Catalina should have been, that's my own personal feeling, because a lot of the changes that were involved in Big Sur are aesthetic and design changes. And that's great, but they're not architectural changes. That's what was done in Catalina. So yes, it looks a little bit different. And the main point here is that they've changed a lot of the aesthetics, a lot of curved rectangles. We now have a control center in the upper right, just like we have on the phone. The graphics and the icons have been changed. The position and placement of the glyphs, the icons have been changed in many of the apps. So if you look, for example, here's the notification center has been combined with the widgets as one thing instead of switching back and forth. And if you look at the design in Apple Mail, if you look at the toolbar, the positions and the icons have completely changed. So the positions of the icons are right above the body of the message as opposed to spanning the entire toolbar of the computer. And this is something that is all the way through.
I'm just going to use your plate fork.
Yeah, a lot of people
or whatever you want.
Unfortunately, if you don't like it,
figured, why dirty something else? Or you can eat it right off here.
Okay, so I can finish it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Bob, you might want to mute your mic.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. So the M1 processor, this is a whole new story. And this is a game changer. The M1 is the brand new processor from Apple. Apple's calling it Apple Silicon. This is the first processor. It is now replacing the Intel processors over the entire line of Mac computers over the next couple of years. They've done this already with the Mac Mini, the MacBook Air, and the entry-level MacBook Pro with 2 ports on the 13-inch. FileMaker 19, and I should go back to talking about Big Sur. As far as FileMaker is concerned, FileMaker 19 is the only one that's officially supported under Big Sur. So other versions may work, 17, 18 may work, but officially not supported moving forward with Big Sur. So we should be aware of that, because as you buy new computers that have an M1 processor, those computers will only run Big Sur, and you do not have the opportunity to roll back and use an older operating system if you don't want Big Sur. But one of the really cool things with the M1 processor, because it's in the same family as processors that's in the phone and the iPad, when you're using Big Sur and you go to the App Store with an M1 based computer, if you look very carefully in the upper, I have all those apps up there above that app called Meta, it now shows you Mac apps and iPhone and iPad apps. So that means if you have an M1 based computer, you can now click iPhone and iPad apps, and it will show you all the apps that you've purchased on iOS or iPadOS that will work as is on, well, as is as far as what the developer did. They probably made minor changes on the Mac directly. So you can just download those apps and work on it. Now, is it automatic? Do you have all your apps? No. The developers have to opt in to make their apps available for the Mac on an M1 computer with Big Sur. That means if FileMaker decides to allow FileMaker Go to run on an M1 Mac, and FileMaker Go is free for download from the App Store, and you've got a FileMaker client running on your Mac, I don't know what that means. Will that happen? In my opinion, probably never. So that's just something to think about. We're running short of time, so I just want to show you that a lot of the stuff that is on macOS 10 and then now macOS 11. All these changes are really under the hood. Under the hood changes are really all is what it's about. The widgets and Safari privacy, a lot more things that are changed. A lot of the tech notes from Apple will explain so much of the tech stuff under the hood if you're interested in. But a lot of the stuff with Big Sur really is, a lot of the stuff is really aesthetic. A lot of the changes. There are some really good privacy options with Safari in terms of tracking and blocking and that sort of thing. And Facebook is now totally up in arms because a lot of that stuff that Apple is blocking is income for Facebook. If you guys have more questions or you have other things, those are my ways to contact me. If you want to email or text me or Twitter or whatever, feel free to do so. And I will turn it back to Dave.
Thanks, Phil. What a fantastic job. I mean, again, you hear, I think a lot of us hear about some of the high point items when these releases happen, but to really kind of peel the layers of the onion back and really get a better understanding of stuff.
We could have gone on and on and on, but to try to fit everything in about 20 minutes. Yeah.
But still, there's a lot there, and obviously some big changes. So that's always good to get be made aware of. Just anybody else have any other questions for Phil?
I have a quick question. Phil, can you still run macOS 10 as a virtual machine under Parallels on an M1 machine?
Good question. You have to be on the latest version of Parallels, which I believe is out now. VMware, I believe, is working, has a new version as well, version 12. I started dabbling in getting my El Capitan Yosemite virtual machines working, and it needed some updates and some other tweaks that I needed to get done, and I just didn't have the time. But the answer is yes. But because you're not using an Intel processor, you're using a M1 processor on the new computers. If you're trying to do it on one of the new M1 computers that can't run Intel apps, it's going to run a little slower from what I've noticed. It's using the hypervisor API that Apple provides, but it's not as fast as running on a native Intel processor under Big Sur, which works just fine. The question is whether it works fine on M1s.
And do you know the other way around? I have an older Mac where I'm running some of the newer Mac versions on Parallels, and I haven't done the last one or two, but do you know how far forward you can go in that direction? I guess it depends.
So rephrase that, Dina, one more time.
Older machine,
yeah,
running an older OS and then running newer Mac OS.
I did that for quite a while. During the beta period with Big Sur, there was no downloadable installer. You had to upgrade from an existing OS. So I had a test machine that was running an existing OS, and I then and I had a test computer that was running Mojave in a virtual machine, and I upgraded that virtual machine to Big Sur. So I was running a virtual machine of Big Sur on an older operating system. That worked.
So that's okay. Great. Thanks.
Phil, just a quick thing. You've been very thorough. I think there's only one thing I can think of, and I'm not sure if you'd want to discuss about that, but anything you might say about SIP protection?
Well, yeah, we call it SIP because SIP is a term that they use in the phone and audio industry, and we don't want to confuse it with that. SIP, system integrity protection, is something that Apple does to lock you from having access to certain parts of the system and the operating system. Even as a root user, you still don't have access to certain areas. And the only reason you need to disable that, you have to reboot into recovery partition and issue a couple terminal commands and then reboot, is if you're doing something that is really non-standard. Either the app or the app developers have not yet updated their apps to work without SIP, or with SIP enabled rather, or you're hacking the system to do something it's not designed to do from Apple's point of view. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. If your app requires it, or you don't want to play by Apple's rules, then you have to do that. But that's not something the general public should ever encounter.
Yeah, you have to. I think you have to do it with Pro Tools, some of the Avid stuff.
Yeah, which
But
yeah, that's because those applications have
it'll drive you nuts.
and the audio applications, Pro Tools notably, they're notorious for being not months but years behind in updating to the current versions of the applications. So they will have to update eventually.
You know, I use an app or a finder replacement app called Total Finder, which involves having to temporarily disable SIP. So, but I don't know if anyone else is using that particular little app, but I find it very useful. And I'm currently using a 2012 15-inch MacBook Pro, and I'm planning on waiting until they release the M1 chip in the MacBook Pro high-end line. Would that be your recommendation as well, Phil?
For people like us that are using a laptop as their primary computer and you still haven't upgraded yet, if you've got a large 15 or 16-inch laptop right now and you want to go to an M1, obviously you're going to wait because that computer's not out yet. If you want to maintain a large screen, if you have a 13-inch MacBook Pro or a MacBook Air, if you want to stay with the Air line, sure, you can upgrade now. I would suggest waiting, especially if you want to run, and really we focus on operating systems here, not hardware. But if you want to run multiple external desktops, multiple external displays, right now you're limited to one external display with the MacBook Pro. So if you want to have a whole bunch of external displays, you're going to wait. You only have 2 ports in that MacBook Pro. So it's not just a question of the video card, it's a question of some other components in there. I would say, you might want to wait as a development machine. If you want to run multiple external displays on another computer other than a laptop, the Mac Mini can do that. So the Mac Mini can have 2 external displays with HDMI and a USB 3, USB-C connected, or a Thunderbolt port.
And I have one non-computer related question. I noticed in your under the hood photo that appeared to be a Hyundai Sonata.
It's a Tesla, actually.
It's a Tesla, is it? Okay, it's similar. I have a Hyundai Sonata, and I love the car, and it has some design similarities to the Tesla, I guess.
And I should say that's not mine.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, hey, Phil, thank you very much. Tony, New York. That was very useful. Appreciated. I'm going to drop a link into the chat. There's a guy named Andy Hibbs who does some good write-ups. And good news, he says, my journey on the M1, apparently at least one data point. He's got 19 running and he says no problems, which is good news because I got a client who just went out and bought 10 Mac Minis with M1 chips. So I'll be in the game, and great presentation.
Thanks. And one more thing, Tony, as far as the M1 and not just the M1, but the Big Sur and the way the volumes are split, another thing to consider, and I should have mentioned this earlier, as a FileMaker person, is when you're using functions like get temporary path and get desktop path and all that kind of stuff, it should, and I haven't tested this yet, but the apps that I'm using, I did test, didn't produce any errors. So I'm guessing it works. It should use and abstract the actual new path, Macintosh HD -data /users /desktop, as opposed to Mac. Now, if you've hard-coded paths into your code, you're going to have to update that.
That's a good heads up.
All right, Dave, all yours. Thanks for your comments, guys. I'll save them, and if you have questions here, I'll get back to you separately.
Yeah.
Thank
you, Phil. We don't get you up on the podium as often as we'd like, but when we do, it's always quite enjoyable. If there are anybody else has any questions, please bring them right now. I want to special thanks again, Jake Johnson on Twilio today, Makah on Join Table. That was great, and obviously we just enjoyed Phil Goodman. We'll try to get this video up for people who weren't able to make this. And of course, as always, make sure you jump on to FMDiSC on the Groups IO page to continue this conversation or any other new content. And again, if you have any ideas for future content, you know, I was just knocking on Jesse Barnum's door going, hey, Jess, good to see you. You got any ideas? So Lynn, I'm working for you.
And I appreciate it.
Yeah, but if anybody else has anything that they'd like to present or think would be a topic, please make sure you bring it to our attention, and we'll try to do our best to see if we can do that. Anything else? Anybody have anything else? All right, I'm going to turn things off, and you guys all have a good weekend. Good seeing everybody again, and stay safe out there.